some of the comments made are just so far sort of out there. I just don't know where they come from. But if you met her, she's an engaging person. I understand why people like her.
Do you fear her? Fear her, in a sense, politically fear her?
No, I don't.
Our latest ABC News Washington Post poll says Biden has good reason not to fear Sarah Palin.
Almost sounds like a bring it on type moment. Topline starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABCNews.com's Topline. I'm David Chalian.
And I'm Rick Klein.
Each weekday we're bringing you the very latest political headlines, reporting, insight, analysis, everything you need and want to know about politics.
And it's twitter.com/thenote. Stay informed all day long. Answer our question of the day. We'll make you famous.
I bet we got a lot of response to the one today.
Oh my.
Get us started. What is your top line?
Sarah's slide, a startling new ABC News Washington Post poll, has documenting the precipitous decline in Sarah Palin's approval ratings, even just since November when she launched her book tour. Big changes and increasing skepticism, first of all, about the question of whether she's even qualified to be president in voters' mind. And also these favorable ratings are just upside down from her perspective right now. She's not moving in the right direction. Right.
That basic measure of popularity, only 37% of the country view her favorably. That is a low in our poll. But it's not just the electorate at large. Also, Republicans don't think she's qualified. A slim majority of them, so we'll get into that in a little bit. Terror politics. Yes, the politics of national security front and center as the Republicans getting a little sloppy on the way that they're handling this Abdul Muttalib case, and Democrats are pouncing. You had Newt Gingrich making factual errors on The Daily Show earlier this week. You had Kit Bond also having his total facts in place when being pressed on how the Bush administration handled some of these cases inside the criminal justice system. The White House and the Democrats were definitely on defense with this, but it seems that the Republicans got a little careless in the way they were making this case.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, David. And I think one of the things that we've seen change here is how aggressive Democrats, and particularly the White House, has been in pushing back and citing facts, not just allowing this to stand in terms of the rhetoric. Yes, you're soft on terror. No, you're not soft on terror. Saying, look, this is exactly what happened, and this is why what Congressman or Senator so-and-so is saying is incorrect.
And it boils down to that core debate of should terrorism cases be handled as criminal justice
matters.
cases? Yeah.
Exactly. Bouncing back, the White House is out with its annual economic report forecasting job growth of some 95,000 jobs per month through the end of the year, which might sound like a lot, but if you look at it over the entire year, that's only 1.1 million jobs that they're saying would be created, new jobs this year. That is a pace that's going to make it actually very hard for them to reach this 3.5 to 4 million saved or created stimulus jobs. Even though we know these numbers are massaged to the nth degree, this is actually not a particularly optimistic report if you drill down.
No, although I'm always a little skeptical because I always feel like the White House probably wants to lowball these numbers to be able to have a case to make later on. But they need to hope that's an average 95,000 jobs enough. They need to hope that that's front-loaded just in terms of the political calendar. And of course, we're seeing some bipartisan work now coming out of Congress on a jobs bill. So we'll continue to track that. And finally today, Cuba Libre. Yes, Lincoln Diaz-Balart, the Republican congressman from the Cuban-American district down there in South Florida, is announcing that he's not going to run for re-election. Now, this is a Republican-leaning district. Not even Democrats on Capitol Hill think this is one that they can flip in what is going to be a tough year for them. But to me, Rick, it provides a window into the Cuban-American vote, and that we may be able to see in an open race that it may not be as solidly Republican as it once was. This is not your father's Cuban-American vote anymore. There's a new generation here of Cuban-Americans who are starting to vote a little bit like overall Hispanics, which are not so swingy these days, overall Hispanics. They're really part of the Democratic base.
They're not swingy at all, and we're seeing that broad change. It could play out there. We'll see if it gets onto the map in a serious way for the Democrats.
We're going to begin with presidential politics. Yes, we're joined by potential 2012 contender, I guess, Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. And are you definitively seeking the Republican nomination in 2012?
Actually, David, I've started up a 501c4, which is really talking about the issues of the day, so able to raise money, talk about issues of the day. And as part of that, I have no intention of running for federal office. That's part of the 501c4. So
big but?
Well, I can't say that. Maybe, that there's conjecture over that. I'm flattered by it, but again, issues of the day, and issues of the day start with spending and the deficit and taxes, the fact that taxes are going up across the board.
Before we get to those economic issues, I do want to just touch a bit on foreign policy with you for a moment. Iran leader Ahmadinejad announces that they have enriched nuclear uranium. What do you make of Obama administration policies towards Iran right now? Is this working or not?
You know, without... Again, I'll just put a question mark on whether or not it's working or not. I think from my vantage point, I really can't, I wouldn't say. I will tell you that prior to our going into Iraq, I would have opposed our military involvement in Iraq, believing that we had the military surveillance capability to see them roll out any weapons of mass destruction. And if we would have seen that, why we could have gone in and dealt with that on a surgical military kind of a basis. I thought that if we went into Iraq, we would get mired in a civil war to which there would be no end, and I'm afraid that that's what transpired. I think we're following that same course in Afghanistan, that at the end of the day, we're going to spend a lot more money in Afghanistan, and a lot more men and service women will have lost their lives. So,
do you think in any way we'd be less safe in some way if we pulled out of both Iraq and Afghanistan?
No, I think, in fact, we may be counterintuitive with what we're doing. I just, look, we need to provide a strong national defense in this country. That is government's role. I would just argue that maybe we're spread a little bit too thin, and that we ought to be concentrating on real threats, and that Iran may pose that real threat with enrichment of uranium.
Let's turn to the deficit and spending. Deficit is huge. Is now the time for tax hikes to try to get this deficit in order?
No, now is the time to really slash spending, and of course at the core of slashing spending is entitlement. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. It's got to be
just spending? You don't have to do both? You don't also have to increase taxes?
Well, I would argue that you can increase taxes, because you increase taxes and legislators just spend the money. That's my experience. They spend the money, and of course when it comes to the federal government, they print the money. Right now, 43 cents out of every dollar that's being spent is being borrowed, and I recognize that at the core of this is entitlement, and that's what has to be dealt with at the core of all this.
So cutting entitlement programs, that has to happen.
Cutting entitlement programs has to happen. I mean, you guys saw here, what 2 days ago, where Social Security is done for. I mean, whether that's 2 years from now or whether that's tomorrow, it's not funded anymore. And it's here. It's not our kids. It's not our grandkids. It's now. Medicare, you know, the Republicans talking about criticizing Obama for potentially cutting Medicare. Medicare has to be cut. Medicare has to be put on the table, and solutions have to be brought about to reduce that spending. And I would argue that those solutions lie with the free market. That really, this initiative, Our America Initiative.com, I'm going to plug this maybe.
Go ahead,
maybe
please.
a couple of times.
Yeah.
OurAmericaInitiative.com is about free market. That we have free market solutions to reduce costs. You know, I heard the debate on health care. What I heard was we need to reduce costs. Well, as it sits right now, to me, you're going to dump 30 million more Americans on a system that has no added capacity. To me, this is going to result in rationing, and it's going to result in higher costs.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you supported Ron Paul's candidacy in 2008. Is that correct?
I did, yeah.
And would you like to see him run again in 2012? Does he speak?
I think it wouldn't be a bad thing. I haven't spoken with him, but again, I think he raised consciousness when it came to issues like the Federal Reserve and what was happening in our economy. I think that those have come to play themselves out.
One thing you've been outspoken about as you're traveling the country is legalization of marijuana. I want to ask you specifically like that. I don't know where the polling on that is inside the Republican Party, but I can't imagine it's got really broad support at this point from conservatives.
Well, actually, I think the issue itself is at a tipping point, and I do espouse the legalization of marijuana. And when I talk about legalizing marijuana, all right, it's never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car. It's never going to be legal to smoke pot, do harm to others. It's never going to be legal for kids to smoke pot, okay? That said, we're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. Half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend on the courts, and half of what we spend in the prisons is drug-related. I would argue that Look, I haven't had a drink of alcohol in 22 years.
Right.
Best decision that I ever made. I have smoked pot. I don't smoke pot now because it's a decision that I've made. I think the country would be a lot better off if no one were allowed to drink.
Right.
But we tried that, right? We tried that, and what happened was that people continued to drink. So now, because they continued to drink, they were criminal. Well, why can't we make that same correlation today? Why can't we make the same correlation today that Al Capone was the guy that got rich? Blood and guns ruled today instead of the courts. Why can't we make that same correlation? People today smoke pot for the same reason that people drink.
Governor Gary Johnson of New Mexico, potential Republican.
Is this over? Is this like over?
Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. We'll have you back. We'll have you back though when you come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.